And take the opportunity to introduce the next speaker and the next section. Jaime De Castillo, who is somebody who has been involved in innovation strategies and regional cooperation since many years. I was privileged to know him since the last century. Will lead and guide us through this session of international cooperation. I don't want to add anything more on the experience that Jaime has. Everybody knows him. Jaime, it's a pleasure to introduce you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Esteban. You are really a friend. And then, well, it's true. In any case, that we know each and for each one for the last 20-25 years working on the same things, but also with Andrea, and also with some of the speakers that I have the honor to present today. Then we will talk about a very interesting program called International Urban and Regional Cooperation that came after, I would say, a big experience of different European Commission institutions to promote the international cooperation of Europe with other parts of the world, to share with them, and I say to share, not to learn, to teach, to share the experience of the policies and the instruments to promote regional economic development. And in particular, in the last years, as all of you know, one of the most important instruments of the European Union to promote regional development and regional competitiveness is RIS3, Regional Innovation and Smart Specialization Strategy, or as they call now, Research and Innovation and Smart Specialization Strategy. But I prefer to stress in the regional word, because I think that RIS3 has been an important instrument to improve the capacity of many European regions to better define what they want to be and how they have to make, to do, to be the region that collectively wants to be. Then, departing of the large European experience, we have had some projects in some projects in a pilot program financed by European Parliament to check if really there is some interest from European part to promote this technical cooperation in the methodologies and in the ways to implement regional innovation strategies. And later, in the last 2 years, we have also the experience to promote a program called International Urban Cooperation, financed by the Foreign Instrument Partnership, that is an instrument of the European External Affairs Service to promote also European interest, but also to promote the European vision of the things and European competence. And then one of the aspects where FPI was centered is in the exchange of urban policies as they are now in the Regional Development Fund, and also the RIS3 experience. And for the last 2 years, 20 Latin American regions were paired with the 20 European regions to exchange experience in innovation policy, to exchange the capacity to collaborate in technological aspects, in business possibilities, and so on. And I think that the experience was very positive, and is now the second part of this experience that a really engaged person in this type of activities will present. I have the honor to introduce Mr. Ronald Hall. Many of you know him. He was in many different positions in regional general directorate. He knows very well all the aspects of the European regional policy, but in particular for the last years, I have the privilege to collaborate with him in different projects, and he has a very large experience of the cooperation of the European Commission with other parts of the world in this type of technical cooperation. Then he will introduce you with this program, International Urban and Regional Cooperation. Ronald, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Central European time. Good very early morning if you are listening in from Argentina and other countries in Latin America. Congratulations, Jose. And good evening if you are in the Eastern Hemisphere. I will seek to successfully share my screen with you. So first of all, many thanks to Eurada for inviting me to participate in this conference. I have known the organization for many years and worked closely with them, and I'm very happy that this opportunity has been renewed as they are now a partner in our International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program. What I want to tell you this morning in this hopefully short presentation is that this cooperation has now established quite deep roots, and that's very important if you are working in a city authority or in a regional authority, because it essentially means that the cities and regions are now fully recognized partners in the European Union's global external action policy. In other words, they are recognized as part of the diplomatic efforts of the European Union, which we believe holds many benefits for the cities and regions involved. The regional and urban policy aspect of external policy now has 15 years of history in its most recent incarnation. It inserts into the broad policy dialogues that exist between the EU and non-EU countries that cover a number of topics and sectors. It meets with the concern of both mature and emerging economies to create more sustainable models of development in economic, social, and environmental terms. And we have found that our partners in non-EU countries increasingly are asking for regional and urban policy to be included in the policy dialogue process. And this has taken the form, for example, of political mandates that come from EU, non-EU summits, notably with the EU strategic partners. And last but by no means least, we're engaged in this activity because we've enjoyed very strong political support from the European Parliament over the years. And since 2009, the European Parliament has used its margins of flexibility in budgetary decision-making at the EU level to grant resources to support this form of cooperation. And that European financial support continues right to this day, in the sense that we are still engaged in projects that are 100% supported as a result of decisions made by the European Parliament. I could list a very long set of examples of what the statements coming from our interaction with non-EU countries say. But for example, if I quote the China EU communication, both sides agreed to establish an exchange of experience with the authorities responsible for regional policy, with the object of contributing to the establishment of a policy for reducing regional disparities in China. In Brazil, the dialogue on regional policy will allow Brazil to share the EU's experience in reducing regional disparities and achieving a better territorial balance, etc., etc. There's a similar one with Ukraine, with Russia. One of the more recent ones was in the EU-Japan Strategic Partnership Agreement, which is a very important vehicle for the organization of international cooperation between EU and non-EU countries. And there is this specific focus on cooperation on urban policy, a very particular interest, of course, of Japan as a highly urbanized society, and so on and so on. The result is that in the specific field of regional and urban policy, we now have 14 international agreements formalized with partners in different ministries in different countries, depending on the distribution of competences in those countries. The pictures show Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina, but of course that's 3 out of a total of 14. They're very simple documents, but nevertheless they are signed at a very high level. And of course, the critical factor in that for ourselves in the Director General for Regional Policy is that these agreements mean that at a high level mean that we have the legitimate right to mobilize resources in pursuit of the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding, the Joint Declaration, the Letter of Intent, or whatever form the agreement may have taken. The one with China in this case is an MOU, the first one ever to be signed, and it's 15 years old, back in 2006. As Jaime indicated, one of the particularly important developments in the international cooperation has been this support emanating from the European Parliament. I've alluded to it already in the sense that it has brought financial resources with it. And we've used those resources to generate a number of projects, such as World Cities, Urbalac, the LAC meaning that it's targeting relationships with Latin America, and also in the field of regional innovation systems. And S3, we have had the project of Innoval and Innovact. So those are some of the key actions that we have been financing thanks to the European Parliament up until now. But of course, we really joined the big league when in 2016, our colleagues in the External Relations Service of the European Union invited us to participate in external relations policy, which eventually took the form of what was then called the International Urban Cooperation Programme, IUC. And it targeted 5 zones that you can see on the right-hand side of the illustration: Asia, India, North America, Latin America, and Japan. And that project came to an end at the end of 2020. It generated a very large community, particularly of cities, because the vast majority of the resources were reserved for urban cooperation, but we also had regional innovation cooperation, specifically targeting Latin America. Why Latin America? Because Latin America has always been particularly keen to have a cooperation with the EU on this theme. And of course, this has been well and truly piloted with the help of Jaime in many cases, in the case of the Innovact and Innoval projects that I mentioned earlier. So we have a very large community across the globe of cities and to some extent regions working with us in the European Union and working with each other under these key themes of regional and sustainable urban development. The good news is that the end of IUC last year did not mean the end of the EU's external action policy. And IURC, the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Programme, was born. You will have noticed that now we have the region explicitly recognized, and the new IURC focuses therefore on 2 components: city-to-city cooperation in the field of sustainable urban development. It will work on the basis of establishing one-to-one partnerships between cities on each side, as well as creating groups or clusters of cities working on specific urban development themes. And this will be concretized in the form of urban cooperation action plans, a shared document where the cities identify common actions during a period of 18 to 24 months, identify pilot projects, and so on. Then the second component is region-to-region cooperation in the field of innovation, inspired very much by regional innovation systems and S3 in the European Union, again with thematic clusters and one-to-one working relationships. And the concrete form, similar to the urban component, will be the Regional Cooperation Action Plan. Who is engaged? Well, all of the EU cities and regions have the capacity to apply, and I would draw your attention to the fact that applications are still acceptable up until the 31st of May of next week, effectively, while the authorities on the other side, in the non-EU countries, will also have their mechanisms for establishing their priority cities and regions, and then we will engage in a matching process at the level of the IURC project. You can see the list of countries, therefore, involved in the city-to-city cooperation in the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. And likewise, in the region-to-region cooperation, it's the Americas and Asia. The significance of the countries denoted in red is that they are new under IURC and were not present in the previous version of IUC. So the second piece of good news under IURC is not just the addition of the letter R, but it also is the addition of many more very important partners to work with under these important themes. So that's what IURC will look like on a map as to who is engaged. Remember, this is about cooperation. This is not about development aid. So the selection of countries to participate is focused on developed countries and emerging economies in the world. It's an EU project, so one of its key intentions is to project, to use the favored word, EU policy priorities and values. And there are many in that case. We have obviously the urban agenda of the EU and the United Nations New Urban Agenda in the case of urban cooperation. We have now, of course, the Green Deal. And I think in that context, the Bauhaus could generate a lot of interesting areas for cooperation over the coming years. Likewise, I think I3 should be able to do the same, not of course in the immediate future because they are getting off the ground, but that could be a useful fund of experience to bring to bear on our relationships with cities and regions outside the EU. We have tried to bring focus to the policies that we want to organize the cooperation around, and we've essentially established 3 in number. The first one is the ecological transition, very much inspired by the Green Deal, focusing on things like the circular economy, nature-based solutions, sustainable urban agriculture, and decarbonized and energy efficiency, notably with regard to the urban cooperation and in the region-to-region cooperation, sustainable urban agriculture. And of course, we really do want the work that is going on at the city-to-city level and the work that is going on at the region-to-region level to establish relationships and synergies between them. Second thematic priority is urban and regional renewal with for example, the urban agenda of the EU, mobility and transport, urban poverty as the key themes, and Industry 5.0 when it comes to region-to-region cooperation. And the third theme is the innovative, sustainable, and carbon neutral ecosystems. And there we have tourism and culture, health, life science, etc., education, tourism and culture, regional innovation, education, divided according to whether it's city to city or region to region, but once again, with many opportunities for both components to synergize. So that's basically all I wanted to say for now. I want to draw your attention to the fact that we have, after all of these years' experience, collected a large fund of experiences, concrete experiences at the level of the cities and regions that have participated so far in IUC and some preparatory actions funded by the European Union, which are uploaded on the IUC and IURC websites, where, by the way, in the case of the IURC website, you can find the application form for regions and cities wanting to participate on the European side, that is. And you will find written up examples, fully illustrated, of the kind of things that we've been doing over the years, the themes and so on, that have attracted attention on both sides under IUC in particular. These are the major sources of this information. I will not read them out individually. The PowerPoint, I imagine, will be available after this event. So once again, thank you, Eurada, and thank you to all of the participants for your attention, and hope to see you in person very soon.
Thank you very much, Ronald. It has been very clear and very synthetic, and you have maintained the time schedule. That is important because we have a very, very charged, very intense meeting today. Then, before to pass the floor to the next speaker, I used to take your attention to the chat, where you could find the web direction, the link to make the inscription in the IUC program. Then any region that will want to participate in the project has to write in a formulary that is very quick to end. It's just 30 minutes, and then it will be considered as the expression of interest to select the European regions that will participate in IUC. I think that it really interesting to try to participate. As Ronald says before, my self-experience, I think that is a lot of interesting matters that could be leveraged in this type of projects, and to have a concrete experience in the previous IUC program. We have now two speakers. The first one is Jarek Johnson from Ostrobothnia. Jarek, I apologize, but you will have only 5 minutes to speak because we have a very charged schedule, as I told before. But Jarek has a large experience to collaboration with Latin America from Finland, Ostrobothnia region, one of the most Nordic European regions, and has collaborated besides with one of the most south regions in the world. Then Jarek, you have the floor. Welcome, and nice to meet you again.
Yes, thank you. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
It's okay. So thank you first for this opportunity to speak, and I will just very briefly tell you about our experiences, and I can elaborate more than later. We are cooperating in Ostrobothnia, that's Western Finland, and with Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, that's as south as you can get. And the cooperation was, after long discussion, we decided to cooperate within the field of energy solutions, smart specialization, and forestry. And today, that was in 2019. Today, what we can see as achievement, we have been modeling the winds in Tierra del Fuego for wind energy. We have been discussing energy solutions together with the Wärtsilä company, a company that we work very closely with in Ostrobothnia, who is also doing these solutions. And we have maybe been able to influence the thinking on the energy matrix in Tierra del Fuego and provide a solution for a more sustainable energy production that could also come at cheaper costs. We have also cooperated in smart specialization. We have developed the Ostrobothnia model of smart specialization, and we'll be just discussing that. And we have submitted an application to Europaid, and we hope to continue the cooperation within that theme. Then the third field of cooperation was the twinning between stakeholders in the forestry. That is still in initial phase, but we hope on doing that as well. If we turn to the lessons learned on the cooperation and how you would think on your application when submitting it, my first point would be that it's very important to think on the cooperation to find the right scope. It should not be too wide, but it should not be too narrow either. Not too wide because then it will be too general, not too narrow because then you have very few stakeholders that you can engage. The stakeholders you are engaging have to be persons that have been reflecting on the topics in their own region. I mean, for instance, not only people who can say that this is what we are doing in our country or region, but also why we are doing this, because that is what makes the transferable of the good practices. Apart from learning from each other and transferring practices, it's also very important to see that this is functioning well as a development inspiration in a way that when you tell something about your region to an outsider person or stakeholder, you discover new things. You meet new people. For instance, in Tierra del Fuego, before we got to Tierra del Fuego, the universities had never met with the public sector. And they met when we were there, and they had a lot of things to discuss. So this is also inspiring the stakeholders, and this is a very important perspective. It's important to have very motivated people and look for the people. You have to keep your hierarchy very informed, but look for the people who are really highly motivated. We work through people coming from Latin America, working in our region, and they have sort of an interest for the project that goes beyond the project, and they are sort of following the project because they have both cultures in them. So I would say that the cultural context is very important. Together with of course that you know your context thematically. We were, for instance, able to identify that, say, the Tierra del Fuego, that they have a problem of industrial lock-in. But that's due to the fact that we have one problem ourselves as well. And we have been thinking on this topic. So you have to have the cultural competence with you, but you also have to be deep in the fields that you opt for. Finally, I would say it's also very important to have some recreational activities involved in the cooperation. I mean, they had a Tierra del Fuego Loppet, that's like the Vasa Loppet, but in Tierra del Fuego, the southernmost skiing competition in the world, 50 kilometers close to Antarctica. And we were able to send 2 skiers to go to Antarctica because, I mean, these things are sort of fun because after all, the cooperation between regions are cooperation between people. And also with having some recreation activities and some this kind, you create the conditions for the twinning that will continue, that you know, you have a good friend in Tierra del Fuego somewhere else, something is happening on your table, and then you can pass an email to the person and you maintain the contact. Because, I mean, finding good cooperation, finding projects, it takes time, you know, ideas has to be anchored and so on. And the idea is to maintain the contact over time, but to also have a clear focus on what you are doing. That was about what I had to say. And yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerker, for the clarity of the exposition, and in particular to respect strictly the time allocate. That's really a performance. Well, then I have now the pleasure also to pass the floor to Gabriela Macoview, that many of you knows, and she was working in regional development for a long time, even since the beginning of the adhesion of the Romania to the European Union, and she has a large experience in RIS3, even before the name, because she was in charge of the Regional Innovation Technological Transfer Strategy in the adhesion period. And she has also participated in interesting pairing in the previous IUC program. Gabriela, you have the floor, and nice to meet you again also.
Thank you very much, Jaime. I will try to be fast hope that you are not going to be puzzled by my speed. Yes, we really appreciate that you consider that we also have a successful pairing. Our pairing came out from the fact that we had cooperated together with Eurada and our representation office in Brussels for this application. And it resulted in the connection with Metropolitan Agency for Valle de Aburra from Antioquia region in Colombia. Why do we consider this a successful pairing? Because first of all, it came at the moment when we had 20 years of experience in European cooperation with other countries and in other international projects. But this was the first time when we went over the seas, and we discovered that this cooperation brought on the top of the fact that we had this proactive and open attitude to share the areas where we can perform, but also to share the areas where we still have challenges and we would like to address together. And on the top of this, the cultural experience, as Jerker said, was extraordinary, because we are speaking of a total other environment. We had also cooperated a little bit atypical in the sense that we had embraced the best practices and brought them to our country and to our region in northeast of Romania. But we also allowed us to focus supplementary on other initiatives that represented an added value for our colleagues in Colombia. We are Regional Development Agency, a policy maker for regional development. Our colleagues in Aburra Valley are urban planning, transport authority and environment authority together for 12 municipalities, out of which is also the Medellin city. In sustainable development, as you see here, it was about the management of the water system. They learned how to create a plan for integrated the management of the water system in Valle de Aburra. And we had on the other side discovered an interesting instrument for developing urban mobility sustainable plans for organization with a large number of employees, especially private organization. And we embrace this idea because we consider that this can be then translated for other organizations, not only in our region, but also in other entities around the country. The second one was related to the exchange of experience in area of the standard of living. The quality of the environmental parameters represent for us an interesting initiative developed in Colombia by Public University in Medellin, and we have put in contact with our colleagues of the university in Iași, the Faculty of Geography, in order to explore how the monitoring of the parameters can be developed together with the citizens and transformed in a very interesting early warning system for floods, for wood fire, for other like seismic incidents and so on. And on the other hand, they have also see how we are involving the municipalities in urban development, and we have brought the interesting approach of developing an alternative for funding the investment project based on budgetary participatory process at local level. And we found out that municipalities in our region became very interesting about this system, and they have already piloted projects. And also our colleagues were interested to see how they can develop a system to demonstrate the impact of investment projects developed by the Metropolitan Agency. And we have started here from the model of the monitoring and control system that we apply for European funded program. And that was a good point to start with. The third one, and this one, I think it's the one that is more undergoing as we speak, beyond the project that we have implemented between 2018 and 2019, was the cooperation between clusters. We have entered into discussion between the health city cluster in Medellin and imagistic and molecular medicine cluster set up in our region. The memorandum of understanding already is in practice, and they are now targeting some project proposals to be submitted in this autumn. And last but not least is the example of the cooperation between two incubators, excellent stakeholders for the startup entrepreneurship, Rutaen and Rubik Hub. In conclusion, I just want to say that before we were envisage potential partners for this cooperation, we were gathering information, trying to understand what is beyond the regional development, the cultural ecosystem. We also tried to focus our dialogue on the most transportable, transferable, translational solutions for this cooperation, because we were aware about the fact that we need to focus on pilot projects that can mature and show results during the implementation period. And last but not least is the fact that we remained in contact. We have considered the team involved in the project as friends, not partners. And we are very glad to report you that we have submitted already a new expression of interest for cooperation at the beginning of May, before EURC was launched. And I think this EURC competition will be a success, because 2 other regions in my country want to put applications and want to come into this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, also for the clarity and the discipline to maintain the schedule that you have for intervention. Well, I think that this session has ended now with a clear exposition of the interest to collaborate in international regional cooperation. And I use and invite you to present your candidature to the program, as you have the link address in the chat. And just to remember that the delay ends 31 May, and you could choose, or you could have preference to collaborate with Latin American regions or with Chinese regions. And I think that the second part is really interesting, because if you have some experience to try to collaborate with China, you know that it's very difficult to overpass the administrative and all the legal and institutional difficulties to have a fluid collaboration. And with this project, I see, unless you have the security that you will be support by official institutions in China, then the possibilities to collaboration will be much easier. Well, I pass the floor and the parole to Rosa Escamilla, that is in charge of the animation of the overall program today. Rosa?
Thank you very much, Jaime, and well, thank you very much to all the speakers for your interesting presentations. Lastly, Albert Bravo will explain us the Innovation Growth Lab. Albert Bravo is the founding director of the Innovation Growth Lab. Since joining Nesta, his working has been at the intersection of innovation, growth, and finance. He has also been senior economist and has led two of Nesta's major research programs in this area. Thank you very much, Albert, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I know we're running a little bit short of time, so I'll try to be brief. Let me share the screen with some slides. I may skip a little bit of what I was intending, just conscious of time, and so I imagine some of you have to go to other meetings. Just checking, can all of you see the screen? Perfect. That's always useful. So let me maybe start on why we're here. And I guess I mean, we spend hundreds of billions across OECD countries, programs, policies to support productivity, innovation, and so on. And one of the questions that I guess that brings all us here and all the wider policy communities, how can we make this investment as impactful as possible? And this was the question why, a few years ago, we launched the Innovation Growth Lab, which is a global partnership that basically aims to increase the impact of innovation growth policy by ensuring that it's informed by new evidence, better evidence, and more experimental practice. We are at we see that at the intersection of research and policy, we are basically, the community that we bring together spans both the world of policy and research and practice. On the one hand, we have a number of governments and agencies that basically support our work, that are kind of the policies. And then a large network of researchers that are keen to engage and collaborate with the governments that we work with. We've been doing a lot of things, trying to basically help agencies around the world to become much more experimental, trying out new policies, new ideas, improving the evidence base they generate with them, advocating and campaigning for additional funding for policy experiments, including from the Commission, and quite lots of other things that I'm not going to go into today. Maybe the focus of what I wanted to share is what does it mean to be experimental? How is it different from what we are typically do when it comes to developing new policies? And if we think about the traditional approach of doing policy development, you'll have a minister, a regional minister, a government minister, a director general. They'll have the idea. This is the new policy. This will solve the SME tech adoption challenge or the business university collaboration challenge. Let's go. Let's set up the new kind of large policy, large program. Let's just have one design, and let's simply hope it works. We do the best effort that we can, ensuring it is as well best designed as possible. But ultimately, we basically just go ahead with the policy, and we hope that's going to work. What's the alternative? The alternative is to be much more experimental. That means starting small. That means trialing different designs systematically, trying to learn what works, and then scale it up. That could be trying a new program, a new policy, or trying a change, testing the impact of a change in an existing program or policy that you are running. Ultimately, a key characteristic of doing an experiment is that it's a test that you're trying to do to learn about whether a policy, whether a program is working or is not working. And that's, I guess, the key idea. It's, yes, you're trying out things, which we do regularly, but when you try out something new, you are actually putting in place the systems to learn whether it's working better than what you were doing or not. Just to give you guys a couple of specific examples, relatively simple experiments in the sense of, particularly the ones on the top, and how they can be used in practice. One of the challenges that many agencies have is to attract mentors, businesses to participate in the programs. So sometimes experiments are something as simple as A/B testing, trying to nudge individuals to participate in your program. So for instance, the UK government, they had a mentoring program where they were falling short of the number of mentors that they wanted, the minister had promised they were going to have. They started doing very simple, purely messaging experiments to try to see how do we get most mentors to complete the training and become active mentors. The difference between the different experiments that they ran was an additional 800 mentors for something that was literally very simple, just randomizing a little bit of text, sending a message to some people, sending a slightly different message to another group of people, and just finding out which message worked better to get them interested in participating in the program. Just conscious of time, let me kind of give you another example also of a relatively simple intervention. We very often plan and run funding competitions to increase, to get different academics or academics and businesses or different businesses to collaborate together into a project or a program. So in that case, one group of researchers at the Harvard Medical School basically ran one of these programs and just did a very small tweak in the design of the program. The tweak that they did was, in order to apply for that funding, you had to attend an information session. And as part of the information session, they basically mix people up and they, quote unquote, force them or nudge them to talk to each other. That was a very simple intervention. But the result of that intervention was that the people that were basically randomized to meet were actually almost twice more likely to collaborate. And again, that was a very small tweak. That didn't cost any money to do. That was just embedding a very small scale experiment into the delivery of an existing program with a significant impact in terms of the new collaborations that were created at very little cost. The last example I wanted to discuss, just to kind of to give you an idea, just some down-to-earth examples that you can probably relate to, is one example that one project that was done in China, and we know, many of you, if not all of you, probably run different types of interventions to help businesses, small businesses to grow. Typically, you'll have someone paid by the agency to support some consultancy to that business. This group of academics tried something slightly different. They sort of said, what if we basically, the only thing that we do is we help small business managers to learn from each other. So instead of putting a consultant that would basically teach them how they had to manage their company, what they did was, let's just create monthly groups of businesses where they get together and they talk to each other for a year of the challenges they face, how they are dealing with their challenges, and yes, we're putting a facilitator in there to facilitate the conversation, but that's it. And they did that in an experimental way. So they basically said, here are a couple thousand businesses, don't remember the exact number now. We don't know whether this is going to work, so we are going to use a lottery. Half of those businesses will get this intervention. The other half will continue with business as usual. And they just realized the businesses that had gone through the intervention, they increased their firm revenue by 8%, which for those of you that work on business support, it's quite a big impact for an intervention that didn't cost much. The main, I guess, message that I like to kind of leave you with is that regardless of the program that you are thinking about, and this is an example of a program, a typical funding call where you announce, you promote it, then you get the applicants, then you assess the proposals, then you finalize the terms, and then you give them the funding and the support. Across any program, there is always a customer journey. And across that customer journey that the SME customers that you are serving will go through, you have many questions about how things could be done differently. And you can use experiments to address many of those. How do you get more applicants? What support you give to applicants? In addition to funding, is there a need for additional support? And so what? I mean, what do you do with the, after the end of the program? Should you continue with something else or not? All these are very simple questions that are important, that have an impact on the that will have an impact on the policy and on the additionality of the policy and the performance of the businesses. All these are important questions. Typically, we just assume the answer to those. We think which is the best answer that we can think of, and we just go ahead. But actually, many of the things can be tested, and sometimes the answers that you get surprise you, and you end up with much better choices and much more impactful programs. So what basically at IGL we do is to try to move organizations from the bottom quartile in here, which are where most decisions are basically based on intuition, to the top right in the screen, where they are much more experimental. And that means both having internally the openness, the willingness to question what they are doing, being agile, constantly testing and learning how to do things better, but also the capabilities to do that, because and how they can build their capabilities in-house. My last slide is, if any of these is interesting, Eurada and IGL have agreed to basically cooperate with to help strengthen the capabilities of the Eurada members that are interested, so they can improve the design of the programs. So Rosa has a Slido poll, and what we're trying to get is basically your views on whether you would be interested in participating in a workshop on this, not just 15 minutes, but half a day, and whether we should think about offering more advanced training offer following that for the organizations that really basically want to go down this path. And I think I'll leave it here, and I'll just give you the floor to Rosa.
Thank you very much, Albert. Yes, we have the Slido questions, so my colleague Giacomo is going to proceed to share it with you. And you can join at slido.com, and once you enter, we can answer all the 4 questions. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or don't know how to do it, just please tell us on the chat, and we will help you.
It is very, very easy. You should take your phone, type slido.com, and then put hashtag Agorada 2021. And so you can join the Slido pool. I will leave this slide for another 30 seconds, and then we can move to the real question.
And maybe if anyone has any questions in the meantime, I did rush a little bit, just conscious that there is still the conclusion and we were running late, but they can add questions to the chat, or they can ask them now as well while we have this slide. So we also wanted to get a sense of how likely how many people have set up experiments in the past, and what's the interest of doing more. Let's see if we can get a few more responses in the poll. I think it's interesting to see the number of agencies that have been doing policy experiments. It's still a small sample, I would say, given that we have 90 people in the call. So I wonder whether the other 70 people are basically on the yes or no category. But just conscious of time, I may wonder whether it's useful to see the other questions.
When you want, Albert, we can move to the second one.
Yeah, that's what I saw. That's if you can, be conscious of time, we just probably. Okay, so it seems it's always nice to see almost unanimity about the idea of becoming more experimental. It's always nice also that there is no 100%, because it says that there's some diversity of views, which is always a good thing to avoid good things. So, do we want to move? Just conscious of time. Do we want? You manage the timing. So, Rosa, if you want to just move to the next one.
Okay, perfect. We go to the next one.
Okay, I think we can move to the next one. Just we have some active responders that are very quick, but then the.
Perfect. Yes.
And just to give the background where we are speaking, the idea was, let's just start with one workshop. We see what the interest is based on that, and depending on the interest, we could think about more of a longer term, more intensive capacity building program, which is something that we've been doing with quite a few different organizations, from TAFTI with some agencies to NASA for kind of some of the programs. So I think we've gotten kind of the sample size that we basically have been getting on the responses. Thank you very much. If you are, I mean, we with Eurada will be getting back to you on the workshop, and we'll put a date for after the summer and hopefully as many of you can make it. That would be ideal. And based on that interest, we'll see what comes next. But if in the meantime you want to reach out, I'm sure Eurada will share the slides. We have a website, we have a database with a lot of examples of interesting experiments that may inspire you. And we'd be obviously always happy to have a chat and tell you something more about the work we're doing and how you can use experiments even before the workshop. So just drop us a line. And thank you very much to Eurada and everyone for kind of still being here.
Thank you very much, Albert, for this interactive presentation and for taking all parts of your initiative and of your ideas. Thank you very much for participating today. So, well, finally, today we have the pleasure of having Bogdan Celariu, who is going to make the closure and conclusions of Agorada 2021. He's the Vice President of Eurada, and please, Bogdan, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Thank you so much. I will be very short because I know the glucose level is low, and that's why people also don't reply to the slide and so on. So I just want to say three things. One, to thank a lot for the organization and for the speakers. We learned a lot of interesting things today. Thanks also for the participants. Secondly, as a bit of a corporate historian, I must say that this morning I checked what was the agenda of Agorada 7 and 8 years ago. And it's very interesting to see the progress, like in the next programming period, what are our hopes and dreams? And it's also very interesting to see what we were talking about 7 years ago. And we were talking about very small things or simple things. And now we could see that agencies do have a lot of complex things to deal. Like there's a lot about economic diplomacy, like, going outside Europe, doing a lot of things, cooperating more. We see there's a lot of experimentation about Bauhaus and society and design and architecture, and everything becomes multi-sectorial in Europe. Last but not least, I would say that to add on this complexity, that also the resources in the future will be bigger in Europe. I mean, don't forget that we have the next cohesion funds, the recovery and the resilience, the REACT-EU, and all this would mean 2 or 3 more, there will be 2 or 3 times more money than normal. This means a lot of challenges for us and a lot of new topics. So that's why I'm thankful to Eurada, because we have a platform to discuss this. And the good news is that our members from Valencia do plan to have the Agorada Plus in a non-virtual way. So actually, we invite you to take part of Agorada Plus this October on 28 and 29, to be there with us and to debate live all these new interesting things that are bubbling now in Europe. Last but not least, please tell your colleagues and friends and collaborators that on the 30th of June and the 1st and 2nd of July, we will have the Eurada summer course. So if you have new colleagues, beginners, people that are not familiar with things regarding European projects, if they want to build up a bit, please tell them to join us. And that's all from my side. I'm really thankful for having so many of you today, and thanks a lot to the Eurada team and for the speakers for making time and staying with us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bogdan. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.